What if I told you there was a wall so strong, so legendary, that it held back empires, crusaders, and invading armies for more than 1,000 years? A wall that stood tall while the world around it changed, till one invention finally brought it crashing down. This is the story of the walls of Constantinople, the fortress that refused to die. In the early 5th century, the Roman Empire in the west was falling apart, but in the east, the empire was still alive and thriving. At the center of that power was Constantinople, a city so valuable, so rich, and so strategically placed that if you controlled it, you controlled the passage between Europe and Asia. But Constantinople needed protection, and so Emperor Theodosius II ordered the construction of a defensive system that would become legendary. These defenses were not just one wall, they were three. First, there was a wide moat, often filled with water, forcing attackers to slow down. Behind that was an outer wall, tall enough to rain arrows down on anyone who got too close. And finally, there stood the great inner wall, 5 meters thick, 12 meters high, reinforced with towers every 70 meters. Together, they formed the Theodosian Walls, finished around the year 413. They weren't just stone and mortar. They were a declaration to the world: this city will never fall. The walls were tested almost immediately. Earthquakes shook them more than once, and yet the Byzantines repaired the damage in record time, sometimes within weeks. And when enemies came, the walls proved unbreakable. Attila the Hun, the scourge of God himself, approached Constantinople in the 5th century. But even he, who terrified half of Europe, looked at the walls and decided, no, they were simply too formidable. Then came the Arabs in the 7th and 8th centuries. They besieged the city with massive armies and fleets. But the Byzantines had two weapons: their mighty walls and Greek fire. This mysterious substance, something like medieval napalm, could burn even on water. Imagine being in a wooden ship, only to see liquid fire thrown at you, clinging to your vessel, impossible to extinguish. For decades, the Arabs tried, but Constantinople stood. The Russians came in the 9th and 10th centuries, attacking with Viking ships on the Bosphorus. They too were repelled. The Bulgarians tried and failed. For centuries, no one could take the city by force. The walls held back wave after wave of enemies. They became more than stone, they became a symbol. As long as the walls stood, the Byzantine Empire lived. But there was one time when the walls did not save the city. During the Fourth Crusade, Western Christian knights turned their swords not against Muslims, but against fellow Christians. The Crusaders sacked Constantinople, looting its treasures, burning its churches, and tearing apart its glory. Yet, even then, the walls themselves were not destroyed. They stood, scarred but unbroken, silent witnesses to betrayal. By the 15th century, however, the empire had shrunk to little more than Constantinople itself. The city was poor, the population small, and the army thin. The walls were still mighty, but the world had changed. And in 1453, change came in the form of gunpowder. Sultan Mehmed II of the Ottoman Empire brought with him something the Byzantines had never faced before: giant cannons. Among them was the basilica, a monster built by a Hungarian engineer. This cannon was so huge it took 60 oxen to move and hundreds of men to operate. It fired stone balls weighing more than half a ton, shattering everything they touched. For nearly 2 months, Mehmed's cannons thundered against the walls. Every night, the defenders worked frantically to patch the holes. Every day, the Ottomans pounded them again. The city shook under the constant bombardment. On May 29, 1453, the final assault began. The Ottomans attacked from all sides, scaling ladders, storming breaches, and pouring through gaps blasted by cannon fire. The defenders fought bravely, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. The last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI, is said to have thrown off his imperial regalia and charged into the battle, fighting and dying with his soldiers. By the end of the day, the city that had stood for more than 1,000 years had finally fallen. For 1,040 years, the Theodosian Walls had stood against everything the medieval world could throw at them. They had defied Attila the Hun, Arab Caliphs, Viking raiders, and Crusader knights. They had been shaken by earthquakes, scarred by fire, and soaked in blood. But in the end, it was gunpowder, the technology of a new age, that brought them down. And yet, even today, parts of the walls still stand in modern Istanbul, crumbling, patched, and scarred, but still there. A reminder that, for a millennium, these stones were more than walls. They were the shield of a civilization, the last breath of the Roman Empire, and the line between East and West. The walls of Constantinople weren't just a defense. They were a legend that lasted for 1,000 years. If you enjoyed this journey into one of history's greatest fortresses, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what other epic battles, forgotten fortresses, or unbelievable legends should I cover next.